Hello, thanks for joining me. This is Revelation for September. Today is Sunday, September 11th, and we will be looking at the 11th chapter of the book of Revelation. There are some new characters introduced in this chapter. So, if you have a Bible that has titles in it, you may have given a precursor or a foreshadowing to this event. But if you don't, and you've come across this and said, wait, what two witnesses? Where did these people come from? So it begins with our prophet, John, being given a job to measure the temple. And the significance of that is seen as a metaphor for the preservation of such items as temples or homes or buildings or monuments. And that's seen in both the prophet Ezekiel and the prophet Zechariah as a metaphor for preservation, as this measuring. You take this measuring stick and do this measurement. Now, then we're introduced to, and I will grant my two witnesses, sort of referring to them as if they had been referred to before. And you page back and you go, wait, where did I miss that? No, they're just new on the scene. There's been significant numbers. There's 24, there's 7, and now there's 2. So they are 2 witnesses, 2 olive trees, 2 lampstands, and they have authority over the weather and plagues. So these 2 witnesses have a time of prophesying before the people. And to me, this is almost just like the call of the prophets of old, right? God gives the people a chance to repent and sends out witnesses, sends out prophetic elements into the world so that they can try to warn the people. And so they prophesy, and it's very detailed about how they won't be harmed. Like, they cannot be harmed. If you harm them, then you will die in this way. Very specific. And they have the power to shut up the sky for no rain. Rain is a blessing. Of course, you need rain for crops and everything. And then in the ancient Near East, and still today, you got a little bit less rain than you probably need. It's a lot of desert. So rain is a good thing. They have the power to shut up the sky. Now, that would cause famine and other hardships. And they have the power to have it rain blood. Oh! And also for plagues. So, and I would include raining blood as a plague, but they separated out for some reason in here. So then it says, the prediction is, when they have finished their testimony, the beast that comes from, remember the bottomless pit where that stovepipe was going down to? It's still a bottomless pit. I don't know where the beast comes from. I don't think he can fit through the stovepipe that the locust came through. But he comes from the bottomless pit, and he destroys them. He kills them. And then, this is strange, because their bodies are laid out in a great city that is prophetically called Sodom and Egypt, where also their Lord was crucified. So it looks as if the author is talking about Jerusalem as the city of sin. Because when you see this before in chapter 11, earlier, that don't measure the rest of everything, because that's going to be destroyed. He told them, make sure you measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there, but do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out, for it will be given over to the nations, and they will trample it. So you have this image of the rest of Jerusalem, and then Jerusalem gets called Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified for. Okay, so for 3.5 days, members of the peoples and the tribes and the languages and the gaze at their bodies. So 3.5 days, they're going to sit out there and rot. These 2 witnesses that are also olive trees and lampstands, they are going to sit up there and rot, not to be placed in a tomb so that people can witness them and their deaths. The people are going to celebrate their deaths because they are, they're right. Remember, they had the power of the weather and plagues. So the people are going to celebrate their deaths because we know this about prophets. Nobody likes them. They tell us things that we don't want to hear. They try to disrupt the status quo. They try to take us off of our lofty shelves of privilege and have to come down and be with the real people, and they cost us something, right? God's message will cost you something, and so therefore humankind rejects it. This is a theme, and this is throughout all of the gospel, and then in the rest of the Old Testament and all the prophets. So we have this theme going on. The dead bodies are laid out. The people are celebrating and feasting because they're dead, and then after 3 days, the breath of life from God will enter them and they will be raised to their feet. Now, does this sound familiar to you? It should if you've read Ezekiel. And if you ever heard a sermon on Ezekiel, which hopefully if you're attending my church, you've heard me preach on this before. The dry bones, right? And mortal, can these bones live again? Oh, this is my favorite part. Oh, Lord, you know. That's a great way to answer a question. No, I don't know, but you know. That's a good question, God, but you can answer that yourself. So Ezekiel passes the buck on to God, and then, of course, you know what happens in the Valley of Dry Bones. The breath fills their lungs, and then the leg bone connected to the ankle bone, and I guess I'm ending the song pretty quickly because I'm out there at the feet, but that's what happens, and the breath goes in. They can't live, so there's all these bodies then laying there when they all reconnect, and the flesh covers them. Can they live again? And, that's the question. And so God breathes into them, just like God does here with these two witnesses, and they become resurrected. And as they're resurrected, all the people are like, we didn't like those guys, but it doesn't matter, or girls or whoever they were. It doesn't matter because they get sucked up into heaven. And now, fast forward into 2 Kings, we are talking more about the way Elijah dies, right? Elijah, Moses too, but Elijah dies because he is swept up. He doesn't really die. He's swept up into a cloud up in heaven. And that's kind of what happens here with these witnesses. It's a similar thing. So they get swept up into heaven, and the second woe is completed. And I was like, oh. And then I remembered chapter 9, verse 12. And that is at the end of the locusts that had the scorpion tails and the hair and the crowns. At the end of the locust was the end of the first woe. And then it says, even right there in that one verse 12 in chapter 9, and there's 2 more to come. And then I think we forget about that because we're looking for trumpets, we're doing other things. And so here we go. The 3 woes are now something we can visualize a little bit better because we've had 2. When I looked on some of the websites of people that have marketed this out to have a system for this or charts. So it was the 3 stages of the tribulation. That's what this is. This is the middle one where these 2 witnesses are there causing all this havoc, and then they get resurrected and the beast kills them, and then they get resurrected, and then they go up to heaven to have their reward. So then that happens. And then all of a sudden, you're reading along in Revelation, and all of a sudden, just the 7th trumpet. Oh, that's right, the trumpet! So we have not seen a trumpet in 3 chapters. So, oh my gosh, here it is, the 7th trumpet. We've been waiting for the 7th trumpet. We read the next chapter. No. Read the next chapter. No. So when we started off this chapter, we're like, okay, another one of these scenes about la 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 la. So the 7th trumpet gets blown. Then we are catapulted, maybe whisked like these witnesses were and Elijah was, up into that original chapter 4 scene, the heavenly scene with the 24 elders and the 4 things and the heavenly throne that's covered in diamonds and glowing. And I said diamonds. The Bible doesn't say diamonds. So make sure you note that. But so then we're back in this heavenly scene up there in that John is catapulted back up into this scene. And they start falling on their faces and singing and praising God when the trumpet gets blown. And then this is this important part, which stuck out to me. Then in God's temple in heaven was opened, and the Ark of the Covenant was seen. So I almost think that the scene goes like this. Like he's down there, he's watching his witnesses, things happen. Then he's like, whoop. And then he goes up into heaven to the scene with the 24 elders, and they sing their song. And then there's like this glimpse of the inner sanctum of the temple of God in heaven. So not the one on earth. We were before in the chapter, we were on the one on earth, but not the one on earth, the one in heaven. And the Ark of the Covenant is there. So maybe it's not the actual Ark of the Covenant because it's the one in heaven. So maybe it's a different one. But if you remember, the Ark of the Covenant in the Hebrew scriptures is a very dangerous object. The people that touched it were killed. God told them not to touch it. And in the movie, Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, in that movie, when they open it, they have to close their eyes because they're not supposed to look at God. They're not supposed to say God's name. And everybody that looks at it melts. And it's gross. It's really a bad initial CGI, the very early days. But that's the lore around the Ark of the Covenant. That is this really powerful and dangerous object. But it's there. I'm so glad it showed up in Revelation because it's such an object that belongs in this book. It totally does, because it was like zapping people when they touched it. I mean, the reason why they touched it wasn't they were curious. They were like, it was falling off the cart. They tried to like get it back on and done. So, this is a really, really, really dangerous and important object. And John gets to glimpse it. And I don't know if it's the actual one. I mean, some of the commentaries say that it's like the heaven one. So it's the presence of God, though. That's why the people melt in Raiders of the Lost Ark, because the presence of God is just too much for people to take in. That's why there's a lot in you'll see in Hebrew text sometimes the word God has a dash where the O should be, because we don't speak the name of God. We don't even approach God that closely because God is so other and so powerful. And this is the lore surrounding the Ark of the Covenant, which is the most important thing between God and God's people, this covenant, right? And that's the symbol of that. So it's very mysterious and very powerful. And I'm just so glad that it showed up in this. And I think as soon as John glimpsed it, there were flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder and an earthquake and heavy hail and more hail. I don't know if there was blood in the hail or fire, but this time there's more hail. There's a lot of hail in the book of Revelation. So I'm wishing you for this September 11th, good weather. Good weather. And we finally got the seventh trumpet. We heard the trumpet blast, and I don't know exactly what happened when the trumpet blast, except for the 24 elders celebrating. And maybe the trumpet blast was like the final end of the second woe, just ending that. And that's where the 24 elders were like, thank you, God. We were finished watching all this calamity happen. I don't know. The trumpet blast was sounded, and we are ready to go for chapter 12 for tomorrow. God bless you.